everybody's ready, we will call to order Reinvestment Zone number 16, City of Houston meeting. Our first order of business is to have roll call for the board members. Robert Clay, and please answer present if you're on. Robert Clay?
Present.
Todd Cunningham? Not scheduled to attend. Ethel Johnson?
Present.
Steve Lerner is present. Kendall Miller?
Present.
Judson Robinson is shown as not scheduled to attend. Lisa Simon?
Present.
Thank you. Louis Sklar?
I'm present.
Wonderful. Mary Carmen Tamez?
Present.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll ask the Uptown staff to identify themselves, please.
Andrew Jarrett.
Bob Ethington.
Stephen Wood.
Betsy Kirkard.
Shannon Daniels.
John Breeding.
Amy Escalante.
That's all.
Okay, wonderful. Is there anybody from the public? If so, please identify yourself.
This is Jessica Hollebeck with Allen Boone Humphreys Robinson.
Margaret Dunlap with Metro.
Okay.
Jennifer Curley, City of Houston.
Kristen Blomquist with Masterson Advisors.
Okay, anybody else?
Ben Terry with Masterson Advisors.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Okay, so we'll go over one more time our normal conference call rules. Please say your name before you're speaking, and please keep your phone on mute if you are not speaking. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes from the November 18th, 2020 meeting. I'd like a motion approving the minutes, please.
Lisa Simon, I approve. Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Mary Carmen Tamez, I second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. So now we'll suspend Reinvestment Zone number 16, and we will call to order the Uptown Development Authority meeting. So we'll go through the same process again. First, we'll have a board member roll call. Robert Clay, present.
Present.
Todd Cunningham. Ethel Johnson.
Present.
Steve Lerner, present. Kendall Miller.
Present.
Judson Robinson. Louis Sklar.
Present.
Lisa Simon.
Present.
Mary Carmen Tamez.
Present.
Wonderful. And now if we can have a staff member roll call, please. You'll identify yourselves.
Andrew Jarrett.
Bob Ethington.
Stephen Wood.
Betsy Kirkard.
Shannon Daniels.
John Breeding.
Amy Escalante.
Okay, thank you. And now, members of the public, if you'll please identify yourselves as well.
This is Jessica Hollebeck with Allen Boone Humphreys Robinson.
Margaret Dunlap with Metro. Jennifer Curley, City of Houston.
Kristen Blomquist, Masterson Advisors.
Ben Terry, Masterson Advisors.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you. Now time to receive comments or questions from the public. Did anybody schedule a request to speak at this time?
We received none.
Okay, thank you. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the November 18, 2020 meeting. So I would request a motion to approve the minutes, please.
Lisa Simon, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Robert Clay, second.
Thank you, Robert. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Wonderful. Any
Lisa
opposed?
Simon.
Has
Okay,
left the conference.
The motion carries. Okay. Our next order of business, if you would please scroll to page 5, which is actually, looks like it's maybe 15 total, and if you're looking at it on a computer screen. But it's page 5, it says summary of invoice approvals, and I'm going to turn it over to Shannon Daniels to review that, please.
Okay, thank you, sir. On page 5, it's the summary page of the invoices that we have received for October and November services. If you'll note, at the top section, we're requesting just over $189,000 for reimbursements to the district. That is primarily for professional services and staff that support UDA projects. We're also requesting $30,848.96 for vendors that are supporting the Postal Boulevard project. The $30,000 are invoices that we have received. If you'll note, we're also asking for authorization of $75,000
Lisa Simon.
in this category to pay
Has joined the conference.
to pay invoices that we may receive after this board meeting, since it was held a little earlier. Then if you go down a little bit further, we have UDA contracts, professional services in the tune of $262,784.58 that we have received, and we're requesting authorization to pay. At the same time, we've also requesting authorization of $325,000 in the event that we received late invoices after this meeting, so that we can pay our vendors during this month. The total that we are requesting that we have received invoices for is $482,800.86. We've also had 2 construction payments from Raytech to the tune of $175,000, $324.37. Altogether, including authorizations, that's just over $1,058,000 that we're requesting authorization for payment. But please note that only $658,000 are invoices that we've received and will be paying. On page 6, it's the Word document that just gives a little bit more information as to what the services are for and what contracts we have. Are there questions or concerns?
Mr. Chairman, it is unlikely that we will have another board meeting in the month of December. We thank you very much for having this early December meeting. And so it is, this $400,000 that we're asking is just for anticipated invoices that we could pay between now and the 4th Wednesday, I guess, of January of 2021. That's absolutely up to the board of directors, but that has worked out well in the past.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like a procedure that we have been comfortable with historically, so that certainly makes sense to me. Does anybody have any specific questions or concerns about this?
No, sir.
Okay, well then, if that's where we are, then I would request a motion for the approval to pay, including the additional authorization for some non-specified in here December payments prior to the next meeting. Do I have a motion to that effect?
Louis Squires, I move.
Second?
Mary
Robert
Clemens,
Clay.
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, moved and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now if we'll go to page 9, Shannon is going to review the NWDBE report. Shannon?
Okay, thank you. Yes, page 9 is our summary. The top portion of this page gives you the cumulative view of where we stand with our professional services and construction goals. The goal for professional services is 24%. Since inception, we've achieved a 39% MWDBE goal. For construction, it's a 17% goal, and we're at 22%. The lower half of the page gives you a year-to-date view for this current fiscal year. For professional services, we're at 59%, and for construction, we're at 46%. The pages that follow give you more detailed information as to who the vendors are and whether they're DBE, WBE, and whatnot. And then the last pages 15 and 16 give you graphs as well, just a graphical depiction of how we fare on our DBE goals percentages. Are there questions or concerns with regards to the DBE, SBE reporting?
The MWDBE report is not required to be approved. It's for your information, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So if there are any questions about that, please say so. Otherwise, we will move on to the next item, which is to consider an amendment to the amended and restated development, construction, operations, maintenance, and concession agreement relating to Memorial Park with the City of Houston and the Memorial Park Conservancy. This is the existing kind of tri-party agreement, and I will turn it over to Stephen, who can explain the purpose of this amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Stephen Wood. This agreement was negotiated by the city and the Conservancy to deal with golf revenue. It's revenue neutral to us, and it doesn't change our obligations under the agreement, but because we are a party, we have to approve it. What it does is it clarifies what the MPC can use golf revenue for, and that includes revenue from the Houston Open. And specifically, it allows that money to be used to restore the park if there are any damage is done during a golf tournament or by golf operations. Also to fund the MPC endowment and to fund green space maintenance. And it would be our recommendation that the board approve this amendment and forward it to the City of Houston so that it could be included in the master agreement.
Yeah, so as I understood this, just the way Stephen explained it, it really doesn't impact us, but it does involve us, so to speak, as we are a party to it. So unless there's a serious question about it, we're not really a stakeholder in it, in the sense that this isn't changing our relationship. So I would simply request a motion to approve the amendment unless anybody has a serious reservation about this.
Steve, this is Louis. I don't have a reservation, but I am curious about, do we know how much money's involved here?
I do not know.
I do not know. No.
I don't know what the agreement was, actually.
How's the best way to say this? They basically, this is, the original agreement was pretty much dictated by the city to the Memorial Park Conservancy. And so I think this is, do we know, John, was this an amendment that the Conservancy requested or that the city requested or both? Or do you know how it came about?
You know something, why don't we, I think it was kind of mutual, but let us get the kind of financial impact of what this might mean. I don't know. And I don't even know that number has been negotiated. This gives them a forum
I don't know that it has.
To make it happen.
I will say this, that Mary Buzak in the city attorney's office asked that we approve this before the end of the year because city council is going to act on it. And I was willing to do it because I'm comfortable that it doesn't affect us.
I'm right now.
Yeah, but Louis, your question is fair for sure. I don't disagree with that, but I'm trying to say this in the nicest possible way. We don't actually have a vote on this, really.
Right.
And but we do officially.
Yeah, and I'm simply curious as to, and would certainly not suggest that we hold up signing it or whatever. I just think that it's kind of nice, even if you're on the sidelines, to sort of understand the magnitude of what's involved, and so maybe at a convenient time we could have some sort of informal 5-minute presentation of what this is.
Sure.
I'm texting the appropriate, this is Robert Clay, I'm texting the appropriate person right now, and maybe we'll have an answer before this is over.
I'm doing the same thing.
Okay, great.
I'm doing the same thing.
Well, if you all wouldn't mind, I think that all that makes sense, Louis. I do, and thank you, Robert. Let's go ahead and approve it because I don't think we have a choice, but I think getting the information just so that we have it is also valuable. With that in mind, could I please have a motion to approve the amendment?
Louis Sklar, so moved.
Second.
Robert Clay, second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Any objections? Motion carries. Thank you. But again, I totally agree. It would be really nice to know. That was kind of my first question. Like, well, if you recall, Louis, there was an original discussion about there being $1 million being made available from the Astros Foundation, but I don't know where. And it was $250 was going to the Conservancy, but I honestly don't know how that all ended up. So very good point. We'll try to get some answers. Okay, thank you. Let's see. I know we've got something important left to do.
Page 22 would be a good start.
Yeah, we're gonna turn it over to Stephen Wood and Jessica, I think, who are going to tell us about the bonds. Okay?
Yes, sir. I'd like to start with a little overview of affordable housing and kind of how we got here.
Please, that's a great place to start, because I think we'd all like to kind of understand where this came from, how it's evolved, et cetera. Thank you.
If the board members would look at page 23 of their book, I would remind everybody that we were created as a petition TIRZ, which means exactly what it sounds like it means. It means that there was a landowner petition that actually started the process of creating the Uptown TIRZ. Since that process was used to create the zone, it is required by state law that 1/3 of our increment be dedicated to affordable housing programs. Very early on, in fact, maybe at the second meeting that this board had, it was decided that it didn't make sense to use those funds within the zone, and that it made sense to turn that money back over to the city and let the city use those funds for its affordable housing programs. The amount of revenue that we receive for affordable housing has increased considerably over the years, and it is now $15 million, which we do remit to the city every year, and they spend it on various projects. Therefore, of course,
Can I ask one question that I've never quite understood how the HISD increment works, and does it overlap with the other part of the increment, or how does that happen?
Well, HISD increment is capped, and John's a little better with these numbers than I am, but the way that cap functions is that we get as a third of that is dedicated to affordable housing, just like 1/3 of the city's increment is dedicated to affordable housing, and that will continue as long as HISD is participating in the zone.
And how long are they committed to participating in the zone?
2029.
So, yeah, you know where I'm going with this, which is to a detailed question that happens later, which is what happens in 2029.
Well,
we'll get there, right? I don't want to take it out of order.
Well, I think something to do real quick. So although the school district's tax rate is over $1.50 or so, they capped it at 96 cents. Of that 96 cents, 32 cents goes to mobility improvements, which we spend here locally. 32 cents go to affordable housing in the city of Houston, and interestingly enough, 32 cents goes back to HISD for educational purposes. And then as you sell, I just want to sort of give you a sense that for the mobility portion of this and for the affordable housing portion of this, you can use HISD funds to help make your debt payments, but you can't size your bond issue based on that. And so basically all of our bond issues are based totally on sizing them upon what the city's revenue will be, and that will be, you'll see that later in today's discussion.
And the reason, the reason for that is that it is legally possible for HISD to pull out, and therefore we do not want to size bond issues off of that revenue. However, it is used, it is pledged to our debt.
Yeah. And Stephen, I think go back.
Okay, well that's actually very helpful. Thank you.
So we give this $15 million a year back to the city of Houston, and then we really rely on the city's internal project management and financial controls and the city's audit. Two other areas, Stephen, if you'll address the issues if we sell bonds.
That's correct. We really have two choices if we sell bonds, or possibly a combination of the two, which is to sell tax exempt or taxable bonds. If we sell tax exempt bonds, we have ongoing responsibility to the bondholders to ensure that the use of the funds, not only what they're used on, but how quickly they're used even, does not violate IRS rules. And if that does happen, it's possible that the bonds could be declared no longer tax-free, and then of course we would be subject to a possible bondholder lawsuit. We'd have some potential liability there. When we are expending those funds on our own projects, we ensure that the funds are spent quickly enough and that they're spent on proper things. If someone else, like the city, is spending the funds, we have less control. Of course, we still, in both cases, have to rely upon the city spending the funds properly and in a legal manner. But if we sell taxable bonds, our ongoing requirement for oversight and reporting is considerably less.
Okay.
Now, if the board would turn over to page 24, the city, in response to your questions, which we posed to them about what they plan to spend the money on, provided this information starting on page 24. And just sort of at the highest level, it's a small repair program, which is repair of homes. That's about a $6 million program. Then a rehabilitation program for $10 million, which is a more extensive home repair program. And then $40 million for a home reconstruction plan. And then the largest share, $44 million, for a community land trust home buyer choice program. And that totals up to $100 million. And we would invite you all to review it. And if you have any further questions or want any more in-depth information about these programs, let us know, and we'll try to get any answers you want that you're interested in seeing from the city.
Do these various programs come under the purview of a single entity at the city, or are they all under some sort of affordable housing group?
Yes, they're under the city Department of Housing and Development.
Lewis, did you hear Stephen's answer?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Stephen, we also, there's a quick note, we have, this is not the end of this process, and we put some of this information in here as sort of the beginning of the work. There was questions at our last board meeting where we wanted to bring some of this data together. A lot of this information, like what the program is going to be used for and whether we should use tax exempt or taxable bonds is part of what will come in the future. Also, we tried to go in and just take a look at what the Housing and Community Development Department internal controls were. They've been very open to us, and I think not only do they, in the end, do the city's annual audit, but they are willing, and we see examples of this where they track revenue sources, those programs, where those monies came from, what they go to, and what status of those programs. So we have the ability that if we go forward with a bond issue, is that we can track the expenditure of those funds much better, not only for an ultimate audit or an annual audit, but also just a report on monthly, weekly, and annual basis about where those funds are coming from and going to.
Keep going, John.
No, that's all right. I'm just going to point out one other thing here, in that, and Stephen, I think that Jessica might be the master of page 28,
Yeah,
and I'll let her.
On page 28, you can see the procedures for post-issuance compliance that this board has in fact adopted and that we will have to comply with on any future bond issues. We may choose to amend it depending on what we do with this transaction. But yes, I was going to ask Jessica to take the board through this policy.
Mr. Chairman, if you got a question before Jessica.
Well, I think Jessica is probably going to answer this, but just to sort of state the obvious, when you have several programs that are small and the programs look like they're terrific programs, that's certainly not the issue. But seems to me, there's a tremendous amount of information one would need to know whether, how do you just look at $6 million for 300 homes? Well, does that mean that they've got to keep records of every single home? To which I would assume it does. Same thing for all of these. There's a huge amount of just plain old paperwork to keep up with this, and then what happens if they don't? So with that, I'll let Jessica deal with this, if you don't mind.
Sure. This is Jessica, and I am going to take you back to the page where they are describing, I believe it starts on page 24, the overview of programs for affordable housing bonds. And I'm asking us to go backwards because one thing I would like to point out is that of these programs, only the first would qualify as a public use and be eligible for tax-exempt status. The remainder of the programs don't qualify under the IRS regulations for the private use test. And I'm happy to go into greater detail. Probably this is not
not
right.
necessarily. That's a huge point.
But I want to, just from the start, recognize that about 94 million of the proceeds don't qualify. We couldn't give a tax opinion on them. They don't qualify for tax-exempt status. And so if you scroll down to page 28, which is where we start the post-issuance compliance policy, everything contained in this policy only applies to tax-exempt bonds. The IRS doesn't require us to do all of these things for taxable bonds. If we decided that it was still worth it to issue that first program, which is only $6 million of tax-exempt bonds, then you're right. Everything we're going to go through in this policy would apply. Likewise, you all regularly do issue tax-exempt bonds for your TIRZ improvements.
Yeah.
That's a little less vulnerable, however, because we're in control of those funds. We spend them.
And we actually have the information. Yeah, we can verify what we did.
That's right. So that kind of umbrella overview, I've promised Stephen that I would get through this in less than an hour, hopefully far less than that. This is a compliance policy that we recommended you all adopt back in 2017, and we do revisit it every year. It's probably not gotten a whole lot of attention because it is fairly boring. But these are also the same covenants that you make when you sell bonds in your bond resolution to maintain the tax-exempt status of your bonds. And this policy, we put it in writing because it's sort of like a shield. If the IRS ever audited us, we would pull out this policy and say, this is how we comply. So going through it real quickly, it sets out who's responsible for doing it. That's easy. It's basically all of your consultants.
Jessica, could I interrupt?
Yes, sir.
Since it is, this is way early in the process, and we have to remember what we're going to ask today is that we're really asking for the authority to request the city of Houston to increase the authorization of our bonds, which just gives us a bigger pool that we could actually go out and sell. We should answer every one of their questions, but to go over what our tax exempt policy is, if we do this, it is highly likely to be a taxable bond deal. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, whether or not.
You're reading my mind, I think, John, because as I sit here looking. Yeah, as I sit here looking at this, I don't really know why for $6 million, and I guess we could ask the folks at Masterson to weigh in on what the difference in the rate's going to be, but I can't imagine why we would do this and perhaps not be able to comply with it, especially when you're looking at the number of 300 homes and up to 20,000. That's a lot of compliance for a small issuance, tax-exempt bonds, and if we could maybe, we don't have to decide today, but if we view it with the lens of, well, we don't have to do that, what we do have to do today is make the request for the authorization. So maybe go back and focus on questions, bigger picture questions, does anybody have any concerns or questions about why we're doing this or whether this is a good idea? The city has requested that we do this, and the way I understand it, we're effectively, instead of paying as we go, we're taking advantage of the bond market to use the funds that will be generated in the future to issue the bonds today, which is what we always do when we issue bonds. We've turned that money over to the city for years, and so I can't see what the question. Well, I should stop there and see if anybody has any questions about the overall plan to issue bonds, taxable or not taxable, for these purposes, and see if we can kind of get to that point. That's all we need to accomplish today, but I want to make sure people ask questions about that if they have any.
Our financial advisor has suggested that the difference between taxable and non-taxable in this market is very small.
About a third of a point.
About a third of a point.
And Kristen, tell me if that's changed since a couple of weeks ago, but I suppose it's probably.
No, that sounds about right. And we, of course, can run the numbers and see what we're looking at in terms of dollars.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Robert Clay.
$1 million.
Robert Clay. So a question. I thought this is stuff that I know nothing about, so this is probably a stupid question. And I was following it for a while, and then I probably quit following it somehow. But I'm taking this as we're giving this money to the city to take care of. I think I'm missing the point where we are determining whether we're going to do this as a taxable or a non-taxable bond. I don't know.
Okay. The reality. So, we currently receive $15 million a year, and we turn that money right back to the city of Houston. They program it within the Housing and Community Development Department. What we're proposing, what we have been requested by the mayor, is that he would like to sell bonds based on the city's increment of about $10 million a year, and that would be applied to a program as we sort of detailed on page 24. The city will be implementing it. We're simply the financing mechanism as we are on a $15 million a year program. We're simply going to take 10 of that, turn it into $100 million, and then the city's going to try to do the program as outlined on page 24. That's really not a whole lot different than what we've historically done.
To answer his question about why we're questioning whether we might want to sell taxable or tax-free bonds, I think the reason is that it's considerably less onerous on us to sell taxable bonds, and it reduces our possible liability. Very little difference in cost, and actually there could be some fairly considerable compliance savings as well. So it's probably.
Yeah, I get that part, but I thought we're giving this $10 million to the city of Houston. The city of Houston is maybe I'm missing this. The city of Houston is going to get bonds based on that $10 million. Is that the city of Houston doing that, or is that Uptown?
That's us.
That is a great question, and welcome to the world of local government corporations. So literally, the city of Houston takes from their coffers this $10 million a year that's dedicated to affordable housing and literally sends it to us. It is in an account for the Uptown TIRZ, City of Houston TIRZ number 16. The city council really has given that responsibility for doing projects with that debt to us, and we do it for mobility. But the board has chosen to send that money back to the city of Houston for them to implement it, and they take that $10 million plus $5 million, $15 million annually. And all they're doing this time is asking this local government corporation called the Uptown Development Authority to take that $10 million and turn it into bond proceeds and let them do more sooner. But
of which the city is administering that program, not UDA.
That is correct.
Correct. And so really, we don't really care.
Well, let me say this also, Robert. It's a similar process to what happens now. In other words, it's really just pulling it forward. Instead of just taking our money and spending it every year, they want to have a bigger fund to spend sooner and pay it back with the bond proceeds of the money we were sending them anyway.
Yeah.
Right. I get it. But for us as board members, whether we give the city $10 million for the next 10 years plus interest, or whether we give them a $100 million bond issuance right now, it really, it's not going to do anything to us because we're not administrating it. I totally see the reason to give it back to the city because, to your point, keeping control of this money would be an unbelievable headache.
I agree with you.
Yes.
And I think that, let me just say, there are TIRZ, and particularly the Midtown TIRZ, who doesn't send this money back to the city, and they administer their own affordable housing program. And I think this board's wisdom, and from the very beginning, saying we think that responsibility is best left with the city of Houston and their housing department. And I sleep very well at night, knowing that I don't have to administer that.
Yeah, that's a no-win. That's a no-win job right there. It would seem to me.
Well, this is Lisa.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, well, my main concern when I heard is about the liability that we're not taking on or taking on. It's just as long as the board is comfortable with any liability or less liability, the better. How about that?
Yeah. Okay, let's also bear in mind something that Jessica mentioned, which is in any case, 94% of this is not even susceptible of being issued on a tax-exempt basis. So, candidly, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, just speaking for myself, to do the work on the $6 million because there's a huge amount of compliance even for that small part of the program. But if others feel differently, for a third of a percentage point annually, and there are probably some savings in not doing a tax-exempt, I don't know why we would do it.
Right.
I totally agree with that, but am I missing it? This is the city of Houston that's going to determine whether it's taxable or non-taxable,
No.
because they're the one issuing the bond,
No.
or no? Okay.
No, we're issuing the bond. We're issuing the bond.
Okay.
And it's going to be, and this sheet is the request that John and the team have gotten from them as to how they're going to use it. And based on that usage, Jessica and her group have researched it to say that only the $6 million will be eligible to be used for purposes that meet the requirements of the IRS to be tax exempt.
If I could get us to turn to page 40, I think can begin to maybe close the loop on all this. On page 40, where we actually are asking the city for additional bonding authority, and I want to very clearly distinguish the difference from asking them for authority or asking them to approve a bond issue, or even us saying that we have the capacity to do to actually sell bonds to the extent of our authority. It's close. But if we could turn over to page 40, up at the top you'll see that the city has previously given us bond authorization for $220 million. We have $192 million of that still outstanding. We paid that down. So we have available authorization from that alone of $27,655,000. We're asking for an additional $149,875,000, $141 million of additional authority. I want you to know also that's assuming that authorization. The city makes sure that is what your authorization, that you could actually have the capacity with coverage of a 1.25, that you could actually sell those bonds. And so we have in total, if you available authorization of 27 million, asking for 141 more, and for a total new authorization of 169 million. You add that number, you add the 141 to the 220, and that's what the total authorization amount would be. We intend to spend or to utilize out of that 141, which is the action, 112 million, which would be the gross amount of money of bonds that we'd have to sell to give the city about $100 million. That's plus or minus. And we have commitments in Memorial Park of $58,500,000. So you can see that our authorization available and our commitments of 171 are close. At this level, they're close enough. And so our request for you today is really in the dark here of $141,875,000 of additional authorization. And you can find that explicitly over on page 45 with a small correction. If you'll look on page 45, it's a resolution relating to the issuance of bonds. In essence, we're asking the city of Houston to increase our authorization by the typing says 141,975. Please correct that. It is actually 141,875. So we're off by $100,000 there. Apologize for that mistake. And so then, if you'll just put this in perspective about what the process is, if the city considers this, and they are planning to consider this either tomorrow, Wednesday, or on the 16th, if this board acts favorably today, and then we will begin a process that will culminate coming back to this board of directors in January, asking for actually selling the bond issue, as we've discussed here today. And then sometime in late February or very early March, funding of the affordable housing funds would most likely happen at that time. So this gives us a bigger pool, the pool that we need to be able to sell these affordable housing funds by approving this 141. But in no way are you giving us authority to issue bonds, because only you can do that, and only when we present you with the documentation. And as Mr. Chairman, Steve, you requested, we want that in advance, well in advance of when they're asking this board to take action.
Right. And, as we've already pointed out, we actually couldn't authorize the issuance of the bonds today because we don't have the authority to do it. This is simply asking for the authority to do it if we make that decision at a later date. But we know what's coming down the pike. We know what's going to be asked of us.
I apologize if this has been confusing.
Okay, yeah. So Robert Clay again, just so that I know that what we're doing. So we're really getting 112 million for the housing, and then we're getting an additional our other Memorial Park money at the same time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Which is roughly $32 million. We've already gotten, somehow you've already gotten 26 million from somewhere else.
Exactly.
Okay. That was easy.
But they are different bond issuances.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which are, just for my knowledge, the total 141 is not.
Right.
Correct. 141 is two different issuances.
It is. Okay, so one for 112 and another one for 58.
That's the way I read it, John. Is that right?
Or 36.
No, it's totally correct. And quite honestly, the sizing of the bond issue for Memorial Park hasn't been determined, but this gives us the authorization that over the years we can come back and sell bonds as we have the growth in the increment in the area to do so. So this really takes care of a little bit of a problem we've had from the very beginning with Memorial Park, is that we didn't have enough authorization to do what we were committed to in the agreement. And what we ended up doing was to use our note program of $27 million to carry us thus far. And we probably borrowed at 13 million of that 27. And so this is giving us, this is cleaning up what's kind of been going on for the last 3 or 4 years.
So we're cleaning up your mess from the last 3 or 4 years, John. Is that really what you're saying?
I'm saying that
we're getting you out of a jam.
I think
what I heard.
I think that when the city agrees to a project with Memorial Park Conservancy, and they're trying to figure out how to fund it, and we identify that we have a note program, and everybody says, oh goodness, great, we can go forward for a few years and not have to go back to city council. And now it's time to go back to city council. Yes, sir.
Perfect.
So I don't know if me, or if it's Shelley or Andy Icken that's getting things straightened up. But anyway, I think we're all good.
Good. By the way, going on back to the other day, we're talking about the golf Houston Open. Memorial Park is going to get $500,000 for a year for 8 years, or 8 more years, I guess is what you said. So that's the amount of money we're talking about.
That's good. Yeah, I think that's an improvement over where it might have been, and that sounds pretty good.
Yeah. So we've gone through here, and
I'm going to request a motion.
Yes,
okay,
on page 45.
I think if we could have. I'm sorry, which page?
Page 45 is the resolution.
All right. So what we'd like to have is someone make a motion to request this bonding authority in the amount of how much, John?
$141,875,000.
Okay, and that amount request to the city of Houston, and subject to, obviously it is subject to further authorization of the actual issuance of the bond. So we are requesting the authority to issue 141,875, in addition to the existing authorized 220 million. Do we have a motion to that effect?
Robert
This
Clay.
is Lisa. Second.
Second, moved and second.
Lisa.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries, and thank you all for kind of going through all that. It's confusing at best.
Thank you very much,
Yeah,
sir.
maybe that should be it. Any confused, say aye.
Well, no, but I think we've gotten through it. We walked through it. It was very important to walk through it because there's nothing simple about it, and there's nothing intuitive about it.
Yeah, I think the key point there is not intuitive in the relationship of the Uptown Development Authority and TIRZ to the city of Houston, and what we can do and what they can do. Yes, it is not intuitive. Thank you. I have nothing else.
Thanks,
Mr. Chairman.
everybody. Okay, there's no project update? I'm looking at my agenda here, John.
I think the only thing I would add is that we think we're going to put up our first arch, Andrew.
That's correct.
When?
In the morning, between 8 and 12.
Cool.
Between 8 and 12
Exciting.
tomorrow, we hope to erect our first arch as part of the land bridge in Memorial Park.
That's very nice. That's terrific.
All right.
Okay, so with that, is there no further business? We're going to recess the Uptown Development Authority meeting. We're going to reconvene the TIRZ meeting, and we're going to adjourn the TIRZ meeting and the Uptown Development
We could
Authority,
legally, you think?
and just say thank you to everybody, and thank you to our consultants who helped us walk through all of this. Thank you, everybody.